All right, let's take you now to our earlier story where the former President Kgalema Motlanthe is speaking at the Institute for African Alternatives colloquium.
May I add that were he alive today, the late Advocate George Bizos would have celebrated his 96th birthday today. As one of the most effective human rights lawyers, he dedicated his practice to ensuring that the marginalized and voiceless have access to the rights enshrined in the Bill of Rights. As the voices of the people most affected by a need for policy reform places the Constitution of the Republic under its spotlight, we are pressed with an urgency to better understand many ways in which today's theme of discussion, democracy can only work if Parliament works, can be examined, and whether the Constitution meets the challenges of today and the future. Be it known that such a theme reveals a certain duality along the lines of the law of the land and the innermost workings of the leadership and public representatives. For leaders who represent the most vulnerable and voiceless in society, their loyalty or fidelity to their oath of office comes into question. To draw out a central theme of the colloquium, we understand that there is a need for parliamentary and electoral reform to ensure that constitutional democracy in our country functions optimally. Additionally, there is a need to contribute to the growth and stability of a parliament where members meet and perform the tasks written out in the Constitution. We are aware that elected public representatives are eternally indebted to those who would have secured a high place for them in the party list. Hence, the reluctance to hold leadership to account. As a result, an individual's political footing takes favor over the essential process of checks and balances required to make the constitutional system function ideally for the benefit of the people. This begs the question of whether an alternative system needs to be in place to protect the independence of public representatives and reinforce today's theme that democracy can only work if Parliament works. For if we want democracy to work, then the duties of public representatives to the Constitution of the Republic are to be carried out within a structure of direct accountability. To unpack these overlapping themes, allow me to propose that we deal with the topic from the vantage point where the system of democracy provides a framework to further explore the state at a conceptual level and then deep dive into the disparities between cooperative governance and the role of elected public representatives. Across the world, democracy's claim of having the sole mandate on the principles of freedom, justice, and equality is being tested. As recent history would tell, yesterday's victims who take on the lessons of their tormentors to heart often outdo themselves as the new victors to become the villains of tomorrow. As such, we are cautioned to understand that democracy is not a destination, but a process, and is never guaranteed simply by its arrival or utterances. It takes continuous vigilance to secure it. Additionally, to pursue constitutional democracy is to acknowledge that it will be a perpetual process like all other democracies. So, if democracy is under constant construction, then the Bill of Rights, which is a defining cornerstone of South Africa's democracy, is also in a continuous state of becoming. Chapter 2, Section 7.2 of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution of the Republic outlines how the state must respect, protect, promote, and fulfill the rights in the Bill of Rights. But only a capable state may enable an environment that respects fundamental freedoms. Chapter 13 of the National Development Plan describes how South Africa needs to build a state that is capable of playing a developmental and transformative role. That the public service needs to be immersed in the development agenda, but insulated from undue political interference. That staff at all levels must have the authority, experience, and support they need to do their jobs, and that this will require a more long-term approach to skills development. Additionally, the NDP illustrates how improving relations between national, provincial, and local government requires a proactive approach to resolving coordination problems. However, with the current situation, we must accept that to improve our national governance system and capacity, we should adapt to make our institutions in all respects more professionalized and procedure-based. The National Development Plan directs us to establish a capable state, but the late Professor Sten Sangweni, who was an expert in statecraft, viewed this as a conundrum because of the manner in which senior managers in the public service are interviewed and selected. He asserted that the whole process lacks transparency and rigor, and that in most cases, interviews are not thorough enough to ensure that the selected candidate is fit for purpose. And that his arguments are clarified if one reads Chapter 4, Section 12, Subsection 1A of the Public Service Act, as well as Chapter 8, Section 42, Subsection 3A. He argued that the President should rather delegate the authority to make appointments to the Public Service Commission, and that this commission should not itself act as an interviewing panel. Instead, it should put together an ad hoc panel of experts and practitioners in the portfolio where the vacancy exists, who will then conduct the interviews, discuss among themselves, and make recommendations. Therefore, the process of selecting and appointing senior managers will be both transparent and rigorous. Senior managers who are rigorously and transparently interviewed and selected for employment should then be appointed on a permanent basis as opposed to the current short-term contracts. This way, the state will become stable, capable, and professional with institutional memory. In a democracy, it is a given that governments come and go, whereas the administration of the state ought to be permanent. When we declare that the Constitution of the Republic is the supreme law of the land, we confidently affirm and accept that any other rules, guidelines, laws, obligations, or conduct that are not in line with it can be challenged and struck down by the courts. This is possible because in a constitutional democracy where power is properly shared by the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, the courts are independent and subject only to the law and the constitution of the republic itself. This brings us to the doctrine of separation of powers. The Constitutional Court of South Africa offers an explanation of constitutional supremacy and separation of powers, and I quote, "A crucial function of a constitution and one of the classic features of democracies is the division of power among the three pillars of government. Constitutions protect democracy by separating state power into three arms. A, the legislature makes the laws and monitors the executive. B, the executive makes policy, proposes laws, and implements laws passed by the legislature. And C, the judiciary tries cases and administers justice. The judiciary is unique in that it is not elected, but it is independent. This means no one can interfere in the work of Constitutional Court and the other courts of the land. In practice, this means each arm of the state keeps watch over the power of the others. The courts can judge the actions of the legislature and the executive, but cannot pass laws. The legislature can make laws, but cannot hand down judgments or take executive action, close quote. However, the principle...
And that is former President Motlanthe there speaking at the Institute for African Alternatives colloquium. And tonight they're focusing on the rule of law, they're focusing on the reforms, electoral reforms ahead of next year, but we're also expecting the Chief Justice to address this gathering.
And we know that he's been in the news as well for a number of different reasons relating to where and when to comment in the public domain about matters, especially political matters. So we will continue the live stream with that. If you want to continue, if you are worried about missing out on the substance of that lecture, you can also find it on sabcnews.com.